Opportunities being discussed by the previous panelists. There is so much. We heard phrases like survival of the fittest. We heard phrases about customer and regulatory confusion and a need for long-term thinking. I mean, there is a lot going on at the moment in the auto industry. I'd just like to hear your perspectives.
Yes, so I think I've been in the industry over 30 years, and I kind of look back and think there's always been ups and downs and we've always had challenges, but certainly over the past 5 to 6 years I don't think we've had quite as many and coming out as quite as fast. We think about Brexit, COVID, semiconductors, trade issues, geopolitical issues, and certainly now the global changing direction around compliance and regulation. And I think that a couple of things could kind of come to mind, as Eric mentioned it before, is we are really a global industry. So things that happen around the world impact us in the UK, and we have to be very much aware of that. And as an industry, I think we talk very much about those big issues, those big problems. You heard about all the challenges, but sometimes we very much forget about the customer at the end of all of this. So at the end of all of these conversations, we've got a family who want to buy a car to take their kids to football at the weekends and go on holidays. Or for us, a big percentage of our business is selling vans, and we've got businesses who want a van to help them keep their business running. And in all of the stuff that's going on, all the conversations, we quite often forget about the end customer. I think that's really important that we bear them in mind.
So tell us then about what you're seeing from your customers at the moment.
Okay, so I think we've got two bits of our business. We've got the car business and we've got commercial vehicles. And certainly our customers who are driving electric vehicles are really positive. For many people, it's the right choice. They really enjoy it. And we know that for many of those customers, particularly the company car drivers that have a really big benefit in kind advantage, don't want to move back. But for other customers, it's not quite right, it's not the right time, and it doesn't work for them. And if I think very much about our commercial vehicle customers, so those are the people that drive vans for their businesses, for many of them, electric isn't working for them at the moment. So all of our commercial vehicles are connected, and we've been working with a number of our businesses to take their data and to profile the use case of what that looks like for them. And around about 16% of those customers can drive their vans without having to stop and charge during the day. The rest of those customers at some point in a day during a week will have to charge. And I guess a lot of you will say, well, so what? I charge my vehicle at a public charge point. But what that means for those customers is they lose productivity. So you've got a driver that rather than getting to deliver their package or to get to the job is sitting, being paid to charge their vehicle. And if you've got, say, 3 people in that vehicle, you've lost an hour's worth of productive time. And then add on to that the cost of public charging for customers. So we, as an industry and us as a manufacturer, when we talk about the cost of charging, we talk about the cost of that cheap overnight rate, and we say that you can drive your electric van for about £3 per 100 miles, which is brilliant. If you're filling up with diesel, that costs about £20, so it's a brilliant saving. Why would you not do that? But if you have to use public charging and your cost of electricity is only 70 pence per kilowatt hour, that's £30 per 100 miles. So that's an added cost onto a business that they don't want to have, and it's a real break point. So that's kind of the theory. When you do the job that many of us do, often your conversation in public is about electric vehicles. People talk to you, and I was talking to someone who runs a plumbing business, and they're based in Suffolk, and a big bit of their business is driving vans up and down the A12 into London to do jobs or into Kent. And I said to him, well, you could have a wonderful Transit Custom BEV, it would be brilliant. He said, no, I'm not having one of those. I'm not paying my men to sit on a charge station and have a coffee. I want them on a job working. So that was a hard no from him. And then someone else I know was sitting next to, the pleasure of sitting next to someone who runs a sewage business. And their employees take their vans home at night. Now, you may be surprised to find out that that business has got a really high staff turnover. So he kind of said to him, well, I'm not going to pay for home chargers because in a month's time I'll have lost my workforce I'm recruiting again. It doesn't work for me. And again, we're seeing really big fleet customers who are actually electrifying, but they're having to slow down the pace of that change because of the cost of infrastructure on their business, the capital outlay, challenges over planning permission, challenges over access to grid. So all of those are really real issues that are impacting customers in the real world and stopping them making the move into electrification. And I think that we often get kind of hung up on trajectories, targets, and we forget about the real impact on the customer. And I think we need to shift our perspective from the legislation and think about customers, understand the barriers to why they're not adopting electric vehicles and try to do something about changing that.
So what is the answer then? Because I think everybody we've heard this morning so far has been saying we're all agreed on where we need to go and the investment's already been put in place, and I'm sure that's the case with Ford as well. But if you think the customers aren't ready for it, what's the answer?
That's a really good question. So I think the answer has got to be rethinking about or refocusing again on what the end goal is. And we heard it before. The end goal is CO2 reduction, and what we've got in the UK is a trajectory that's really, really ambitious, more ambitious than anywhere else in the world. And I think we need to think about how that aligns to customers and what their pace of change is. But also I think we need to think more broadly about how you might help customers make that step. So one of the things we don't often talk about is plug-in hybrids, and I know they're really emotive. But plug-in hybrids can be a halfway house for customers. So I talked about my plumbing business. So if that plumbing business were to buy a plug-in hybrid Transat, they can drive partially on a electrified, but they got the backup of a fuel to get them out. It takes away the worry, helps them manage the cost. The vehicle has lower CO2 because it's a plug-in hybrid, but even if you run it without being charged, it's a lower CO2 vehicle. So I think we need to think about the pace of change, but also think about the tools that we use to help us get there and have a broader perspective on how we make that transition. And I know that there's an argument that says people don't charge their plug-in hybrids, and maybe they don't, but we are a really innovative industry. We have connected vehicles, and I'm pretty confident that if that was part of the future, that we would be able to find ourselves a technical solution to help us overcome that. And we would play with all the tools in our armoury rather than just fixing on one bit. And if you kind of think about where we are on passenger cars, last year we sold over 470,000 passenger cars. That was an increase of almost 20% year over year, which is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal success, but as an industry, we're counting it as a failure because we only got to about just under 24% mix when the target was 28. So we're beating ourselves up and being fined and having penalties, even though we're moving in the right direction, but we're not hitting the trajectory targets. And on commercial vehicles, the industry had about a 10% target, where the trajectory said 16 this year. We need to get to 24. So I think we kind of need to think about that pace of change.
Do you have any sense of confidence you're going to hit that?
So we're all salespeople, or most of us are salespeople, so we never give up until we've kind of hit the last time, but we're heading towards the objective. But as Eric said, the challenge is that it's a very costly challenge to try to hit. And I often say that selling people something they don't want is really expensive. And as an industry that's invested a huge amount of money, we've invested 400 million in our plant in Hillwood that builds power packs for Europe. We've invested $2 billion in our facilities in Europe to build electric vehicles. and we're having to discount so very heavily to hit those targets, and forcing people into vehicles that maybe they don't necessarily want or maybe aren't wholly appropriate for them, try to get a trajectory. And I think a better balance that around that movement would be healthier for our customers, but also for us as businesses.
You really are being, I think, there's a similarity of message from some of the other other panelists and conversations we've had so far today, but you're being very candid about this. I mean, you're almost sounding, I know you don't want to sound negative, but you're almost sounding as if you're saying, you know what, it's not really working very well. You're being, quite honest about this.
So I think that because it's really tough and we're here and we're being candid, I think that our electrification strategy and the investment that we've put in is really positive. We have an electrified version of every vehicle. Even our biggest transit, our 2-ton transit, you can have an electric 2-ton transit. We're just bringing a plug-in hybrid Ranger into the market, and they're all fantastic. They're really, really fantastic vehicles that we're really proud of and really invested in. And our customers that drive them enjoy the experience and think they're fantastic. I think what we're talking about is balance and being more focused on what they want rather than what we need to sell them. And that's making sort of quite a lot of distorted market situations that maybe wouldn't be the best situation for the industry.
We had a big call early on when the Minister was talking that, we'd like the review to be brought forward, not just coming in 2027. When would you like to see that review? I mean, what would you like to be, if you could have Keir Mather sitting here on the stage with you?
So
what would you like to say to
I think that if you look at what's happened around the world with other governments, they've already made decisions and an altered course reflecting what they're seeing in the industry. So Canada's made a change, New Zealand's made a change, and our closest partner in Europe have already made adjustments. And actually the European adjustment was done in a matter of months rather than over a longer period. So I think I'd say to the government, kind of get on with it. Start the review, get it completed, and make a decision and make the announcement this year is kind of what I'd say, Katie.
And what would you like that announcement to be?
Well, I think I would say that so the end goal is still the same. So as an industry, we've invested heavily in electrification, and obviously it's not about changing course, it's probably about the pace of change. And also I would ask them to think about the use of technology, so thinking about the role that plug-in hybrids would play. But also a big ask from me would be that they think about the customer in two areas. One, they better understand the barriers to change and try to knock those down for customers. But secondly, just understand that they really need to have an aligned policy. So last year, we benefited very much for the electric car grant that was launched, which was fantastic, and we were delighted with that. But a few months after that, then there was a tax announcement that customers were then going to be paying 3 pence per mile for electric vehicles. So the two messages just don't align. So I'd say to government to join up and be really mindful of the messages that you're giving customers if your end goal is electrification. So I think that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, I think you're not a lone voice.
No.
I think it's fair to say this morning.
No.
So, and obviously we're talking about a business which is working in regulatory markets which are different around the world, as you've already alluded to. Can you give sort of a sense where, how you're seeing the UK in the broader context for Ford?
So I think as we look around the world, the UK is very much out of kilter with other markets. And although the UK is a really major market in Europe and around the world, you don't make decisions solely for the UK market, or we can't make decisions solely for the UK market. So as you're trying to decide strategy, investment, and directional plans, having the UK being so far out of kilter with the rest of the world is actually a real challenge to manage in a business that is actually a global business rather than just a UK business.
And you've given us quite a lot of nice case studies about your customers who drive vans. How about the passenger car market? Any particular insights into how they're responding to the current situation?
So I think many people here are familiar, the passenger car market is made up of lots of different sectors. Retail industry the retail private buyer is well behind the rest of the industry. If you look at our B2B sector, our company car drivers, a really, really healthy mix of electric vehicles. And I think we can all recognise that's driven because they get a really advantageous BIK tax rate. So, there's a message there possibly for government, I don't know. But, and I said to you before, customers that drive electric vehicles, actually let's do a little audience participation. If you own or drive an electric vehicle, put your hands up. Okay. All of you that got your hands up, if you charge your vehicle at home or at work, put your hands down. Okay, so we've really only got, I think, two people left that probably charge. So, there's a use case that works really, really well for cars, really, really well for cars. And when you move outside that, it's a little bit more challenging, partly for practical reasons, but also for cost. So I think that as those targets track upwards, we need to start, if we want to kind of follow that trajectory on cars and commercial vehicles, we need to start knocking down some of those barriers that would prevent us selling electric cars and vans to a broader audience.
Let's we've seen all your hands up. Let's have some hands up for questions now for Lisa. A gentleman here in the blue shirt, I think, just in the fourth row.
Hi, Tim Dexter from T&E. I just want to say, I think you're being incredibly humble with Ford's performance for last year. You had an amazing year for battery electric vehicles. The Puma driving a lot of that, and we saw some tremendous results and a great trajectory, and from what I hear, some ongoing success early this year, which will hopefully continue to push compliance towards this year's ZEV mandate. We've also been talking a lot about certainty and bringing forward the review and matching possibly what's going on in the EU. I think the decisions being made there aren't being finalised until the middle of this year. So are we worried that if we bring the review forward too much, we'll have to chop and change again when we already had a review at the start of last year? And of course, this is about kind of providing certainty to the entire ecosystem, not just manufacturers. We talk about the need to improve infrastructure to help make sure we're bringing the consumers along with us. But the charging industry are pretty scared about these ongoing reviews that undermines their ability to invest successfully within the sector and knowing what's coming up in the next few years.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is I think that based on the pace of review, I think I'm pretty comfortable that if the review started that we probably wouldn't be announcing our results until after the EU had announced theirs. The other point I'd say is that I fully understand that, so electrification, we talk about it as though it's like switching from petrol to diesel, and it's not like that at all. It's a complete revolution in our industry, and the change that comes with it, everything is interconnected. And I recognise the challenges for the charging industry. I would just say the charging industry don't have the kind of financial penalties hanging over their heads that the auto industry does have. And so I think we need to have a very balanced and more measured approach, is what I would say to that.
Time for one more before we go for a coffee. Any questions out there? Yes, there's a lady just at the front here. Hi there. Third along, if we can get a microphone over here to the second row. Yes, here we are. Thanks.
Sorry, hi Lisa. Do you have any clarity on the plug-in van grant? Because that was extended, wasn't it? And apparently there were going to be sort of a reset on around how much that would be. Have you guys had any clarity?
No,
okay.
not at all.
No, that's probably not surprising.
Yeah, so no, I mean, I'm going back to sort of one of our key wants from government, I think, would be certainty around that, and none of the incentives that we got, none of the incentives in place, we don't want to see any of those pulled back. So it's really important that we kind of have a strong voice into government to say that we need that to continue.
Lisa, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Lisa Brankin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.